barefoot village girl slipped through the palace gates and changed everything.
This house is huge. Why does he look so sad? Maybe I can make him smile.
Hello, my prince. I want you to watch this.
She began to dance joyfully. First she spun like she'd lost her mind. Then she flailed her arms wildly, one foot hopping while the other stomped hard enough to raise dust clouds from the red earth. Just then she heard it.
Stop it! You dirty girl! Why are you dancing like that in front of my son? How did you even get into this palace, huh?
But how did this all start? Let's go back to the beginning. Because this story, about a prince who forgot how to hope, a girl who refused to stop dancing, and a love that defied a kingdom, started months before that fateful afternoon. Once upon a time, in a prosperous African kingdom where tradition ran as deep as the rivers, there lived a prince named Obiora. He was 24 years old when his future shattered in a single moment. It happened during the annual harvest festival, the most important celebration in the kingdom. Young warriors competed to climb the sacred huge iroko tree in less than 5 minutes and claim the golden fruit from its highest branch. Whoever won would be honored before the entire village, their names spoken with pride for generations. Prince Obiora was engaged to Princess Kletchi from the neighboring kingdom. She was beautiful, yes, but more than that, she was ambitious. Their marriage would unite two powerful families. Everyone said they were perfect together. That afternoon, as soon as the watch time was set, Prince Obiora climbed higher than anyone else. The crowd below chanted his name. He could see Princess Kletchi watching, could imagine her pride. Just a few feet more, and the golden fruit would be his. But his rival, desperate not to lose, climbed recklessly fast. They both reached for the fruit at the same moment. They struggled. The branch cracked like thunder, and Prince Obiora fell. 30 feet down, crashing through branches, slamming into the roots below. The festival stopped. Screams tore through the air as he was rushed to the palace herbal clinic. When he opened his eyes 3 days later, his father King Emeka stood over him, face carved with worry. The palace healer stood nearby, unable to meet the king's eyes. "My son," the king whispered, "can you move your legs?" Obiora tried, but his legs did not move. "Can you feel this?" the healer asked, pressing a heated stone against his calf. "Nothing." "What about this?" She pricked his foot with a thorn. Still nothing. The healer's voice was gentle but final. The fall damaged his spine. His legs, they will not walk again. The room fell silent except for the sound of the king's breathing. Heavy, broken, like a man drowning on dry land. News traveled fast in the kingdom. Within days, Princess Kletchi's father sent a message. The words were wrapped in respectful language, but the meaning cut clean. "A prince who cannot walk cannot rule. We must withdraw from this union." Queen Neoma tore her wrapper when she heard. She didn't weep, she raged. She shouted at messengers, at servants, at the gods themselves. But worst of all, she looked at her son differently now. Not with pity, but with something colder. Disappointment. Prince Obiora said nothing. He simply wheeled himself to the farthest corner of the compound, beneath the mango trees, and stared into the distance. Days passed, then weeks, and then months. The prince who once laughed loudest at festivals now barely spoke. He refused visitors. He stopped asking for his favorite meals. His eyes, once bright with life, became dull and flat. He became a shadow of himself. King Emeka tried everything his wealth could buy. Healers from distant lands, priests who promised miracles, sacrifices to every god and ancestor. Nothing worked, because the problem now wasn't just in Obiora's legs anymore. It was now in his heart. 2 years later, on one of those heavy silent afternoons, a stranger arrived in the village. Nobody knew where the girl came from. She appeared one morning like mist, barefoot and hungry, with nothing but a torn wrapper and a single faded coral bead tied around her neck with thread. Her name was Adunni. She was Yoruba. This was an Igbo village. That alone made her suspect. The old Igbo woman who raised her few years after her grandmother died didn't survive during a famine. So the woman's relatives turned Adunni away coldly. "You're not our blood," they said. "You don't belong here." She had walked for days, sleeping under trees and drinking from streams, until her feet brought her to this kingdom. She touched the bead on her neck and remembered how her grandmother had pressed it into her palm and whispered, "Adunni, take this bead. It carries our blood. As long as you wear it, "You are never alone." Since then, Adunni never took it off. She survived by dancing. In the evenings, when traders gathered at the village square, she would step into the circle and move. Not the gentle, practiced movements of court dancers, but something raw, wild. Her feet struck the ground in rhythms that seemed to rise from the earth itself. Her body told stories without words, of loss, of hunger, of stubborn joy that refused to die. The villagers would clap and laugh. Some threw her a few cowries. Others offered scraps of food. The children loved her because she made funny faces and spun until she fell, dizzy and giggling. But the adults whispered, "A Yoruba girl with no family. She could be dangerous. Look at that bead she wears. It must be juju. Why does she dance and smile so much when she has nothing? It's not natural." Adunni heard the whispers. But she had learned from her grandmother that words couldn't break her if she didn't let them. So she danced. And she survived. One afternoon, hunger clawed at Adunni's stomach fiercer than usual. She had danced the night before, but no one gave her anything. Her throat was dry, her body weak. She wandered toward the wealthy compounds, hoping a kind servant might offer her water or maybe a piece of yam. That's when she saw it. The palace. The gate stood slightly open. A servant had left it unlatched while carrying firewood. Adunni peeked through. And there, beneath a mango tree, sat a man in a wooden wheelchair. His head was bowed. His hands rested limp in his lap. He looked like someone who had stopped waiting for anything. Adunni's chest tightened. She knew that look. She had worn it herself after her grandmother died. Without thinking, without permission, she slipped through the gate. She walked slowly across the red earth, her bare feet making no sound. The prince didn't notice her at first. She looked at him and wasn't sure of what to say. Then Adunni did something impossible. She began to dance. But not beautiful dancing. Not graceful court movements. She hopped on one foot. She puffed out her cheeks. She crossed her eyes and stumbled dramatically, arms flailing like a chicken trying to fly. Prince Obiora's head lifted slowly. His eyes focused. And then he laughed. Not a polite chuckle. Real laughter. The kind that shakes your shoulders and catches in your throat because you'd forgotten how it felt. Adunni grinned wider and spun 3 times, deliberately losing her balance and falling onto the grass with an exaggerated thud. Obiora laughed harder. For the first time in months, something broke open inside his chest. That's when the voice cracked through the air. "Stop!" Queen Neoma stood at the edge of the courtyard, fury in her eyes. "Who are you? Who gave you permission to enter this palace?" Adunni dropped into a low bow, her heart racing. "My name is Adunni, Your Majesty." I saw the prince looked sad. "I only wanted to help." "Help!" The queen's voice shook. "You trespass like a thief and perform like a street beggar in front of my son?" "Wait." King Emeka's voice cut through the tension. He stood on the balcony above, staring down at his son, really looking at him for the first time in weeks. Obiora was sitting straighter. His face was flushed. His eyes were alive. "She made him laugh," the king said quietly, his own eyes wet. "All these months, after everything we've tried, this girl walked in and gave him back his smile." Queen Neoma's jaw clenched. "Your Majesty, we don't know this girl. She could be a blessing." King Emeka's voice was gentle but firm. "If Prince Obiora wishes it, let her return." Every eye turned to the prince. Obiora looked at Adunni, truly looked at her, and saw someone who understood what it meant to suffer and still choose joy. "I wish it," he said quietly. "Let her come back tomorrow." The queen said nothing, but her silence carried weight. Adunni bowed and slipped away, heart pounding in her chest, hardly believing what had just happened. The next day, Adunni returned. And the day after. And every day after that. She danced. He laughed. Slowly, carefully, she encouraged him to move with her, clapping, swaying his arms, tapping rhythms. "Your body remembers joy," she told him one afternoon. "You just have to remind it." Weeks passed. Prince Obiora's voice grew stronger. He sat straighter. They talked for hours, about the villages she'd wandered through, the life he'd lived before the fall, their fears and dreams. One day, Obiora said quietly, "I used to climb trees." Adunni smiled. "Then you were brave. Falling doesn't make you less brave. It just means you reached high." Something shifted in Obiora's chest. For the first time since the accident, he didn't feel ashamed. King Emeka watched from hidden places every day. He saw his son's back straighten. He noticed how Obiora began smiling even before Adunni arrived, as though joy had planted itself inside him and started growing on its own. One evening, the king called Adunni to him privately. "Where is your family?" he asked. "I have none, my lord. My grandmother died. I've been alone since." King Emeka studied her. She was thin, her wrapper faded, but her eyes were clear and honest. "You've given my son something I couldn't buy with all my wealth. Hope. From today, you'll no longer wander. You'll eat here, sleep here. You're under my protection." Adunni's eyes filled with tears. She dropped to her knees. "Thank you, my king." But as she bowed, she didn't see Queen Neoma watching from the shadows, her face dark as storm clouds. 3 months after Adunni arrived, Prince Obiora called her to sit beside him one evening. "I want to give you something," he said. He pulled out a gleaming coral bead on a gold thread, a royal bead, worn only by those of high birth. Gently, he tied it around her neck beside her grandmother's faded one. "Your grandmother's bead shows where you came from," he said softly. "This one shows where you belong now. Both are precious. Both make you who you are." Tears spilled down Adunni's cheeks. "I'll never take them off." "Good." His voice dropped, raw and vulnerable. "Because I can't imagine my life without you." Their eyes met. Everything changed. But Queen Neoma saw the bead. That night, she summoned Adunni to her chamber. "I see you wear my son's bead," the queen said, voice cold. "What do you want from him?" "Nothing except his happiness, your majesty." "Liar." The word was sharp as a blade. "My son is starting to care for you, and I don't like it. Because when you leave, and you will, his heart will break again. So I'm telling you, take food if you need it, but go far away from him. Tonight. And don't ever come back." Adunni left in silence. That night she sat outside the palace walls, wondering if the queen was right. Maybe having feelings for a prince when you were nobody was the cruelest thing she could do. But when dawn broke, she couldn't stay away. She went back, and the real battle began. One afternoon, Prince Obiora gasped mid-dance. "My foot. Adunni, I felt something." She dropped to her knees. "Show me." He concentrated, sweat beading on his forehead. His big toe twitched. Then his whole foot shifted. Adunni screamed with joy. She grabbed his hands, laughing and crying at once. King Emeka, watching from the balcony, fell to his knees and wept. From that day forward, Obiora began to try. With Adunni's encouragement, he gripped the arms of his chair and pushed. His legs trembled. Sweat poured, but inch by inch he rose. The first time he stood, shaking, unsteady but standing, the entire palace held its breath. "I'm standing," Obiora whispered, tears streaming. "Adunni, I'm standing." She knelt before him, her own face wet. "You are standing, my prince." Then after a few seconds, he sat slowly back on his wheelchair. Each day he grew stronger. And with her support, he could now stand longer for a few more minutes and move his legs forward and backwards before needing to sit again. Though he could not walk yet, but he was determined to keep trying. But as Prince Obiora continued to heal, his mother, Queen Neoma's resentment towards Adunni grew. This Yoruba girl, this nobody, had done what priests and healers could not. Worse, her son was now looking at Adunni, the village street dancer, with love. The queen's fear twisted into something darker. Then one morning, a royal convoy arrived. Princess Kletchi had returned. She swept into the courtyard dressed in the finest silk, her neck heavy with gold, attendants carrying gifts of ivory and fine cloth. "I heard the prince is recovering fast," she announced, voice smooth as honey. "So, I've come to resume our courtship." Queen Neoma's face lit with hope. "You're welcome, my daughter." Prince Obiora stood frozen. He hadn't seen Kletchi since before his accident. She had abandoned him when he needed her most. Now she returned, not from love, but because he's healing and there's hope. "Princess Kletchi," Obiora said stiffly, "you made your choice. I believe you're fully aware of the message your father sent few days after I was declared paralyzed, canceling our union. You never said anything or visited me." Kletchi smiled, unbothered. "I was young and foolish. Surely you can forgive me? Our kingdoms. I love someone else," Obiora said firmly. The courtyard fell silent. "Who?" Queen Neoma's voice shook. "Who do you love?" Obiora extended his hand. "Adunni." The servant girl stepped forward, head high despite the fear in her eyes. "No," the queen's scream echoed off the walls. "She's nobody. She's Yoruba, an orphan with nothing. You will not disgrace this family." "She saved me," Obiora said, voice steady. "She gave me hope when everyone else had given up." She's worth more than all the gold in the kingdom. King Emeka stood, his voice like thunder. Enough. I've watched my son die inside and come back to life. I know who brought him back. It wasn't medicine. It wasn't sacrifice. It was love. He looked at his wife. You speak of disgrace. But what's more disgraceful? Welcoming someone who heals, or accepting someone who abandoned us when we were broken. Queen Neoma opened her mouth. No sound came. The king turned to Adunni. You've proven your worth 1,000 times. If my son chooses you, I bless this union. You will be the future queen. Adunni fell to her knees, tears streaming. Thank you, my king. Princess Kletchi turned and left without another word, attendants scrambling after her. But Queen Neoma didn't soften. She looked at Adunni with cold eyes, then walked into the palace, her back rigid. 2 days later, whispers spread through the kingdom. Adunni, the Yoruba girl, is a witch. She cursed the prince, then pretended to heal him. Those beads she wears. It must be dark magic. The queen had planted seeds, and gossip did the rest. When Adunni went to the market, women made protective signs. A traitor spat at her feet. You witch, go back where you came from. Your evil dance will not work on the prince. Children who once loved her now ran away. Adunni became sad. She fled to the river and wept bitterly, where no one could see. That afternoon, Obiora sat alone. Adunni hadn't come. For the first time in months, she hadn't come. Panic clawed at him. Had she left? Had the rumors driven her away? No, he wouldn't let that happen. Fury surged through him, so fierce it burned away every limitation. He gripped his wheelchair and pushed. Slowly, agonizingly, he rose. His knees shook. Pain screamed through his body. But he stood. Father, he roared. King Emeka came running. The palace froze. Obiora took one trembling step, then another. He looked at his mother with pain and defiance. I'm walking, not because of your sacrifices, but because of love. Her love, the love you tried to destroy. I'm going to find her, and when I do, I'll ask her to marry me. If anyone tries to stop me, they'll answer to a man who learned to stand and walk because someone believed in him. Slowly, Obiora walked toward the palace gates, each step agony, but before he could reach them, he fell painfully to the ground. His mother screamed. 2 palace guards rushed to help him up. His father, King Emeka, walked towards him, smiled and gave him a walking stick. Obiora nodded in respect. Then King Emeka signaled for one of the guard to walk beside his son. Queen Neoma stood frozen, finally understanding. She hadn't protected her son. She'd almost destroyed him. Obiora walked out of the palace gates, sweating and trembling as he took each step forward, with the guard beside him. But he was determined. Soon, he found Adunni at the riverbank weeping. She looked up and saw him standing, and walking towards her on his own feet, using just a walking stick for support. You're walking, she gasped. Barely, and I might collapse. He lowered himself to one knee, trembling. But I had to find you. They're calling me a witch. Let them. He looked up at her, sweat dripping, pain clear on his face. I don't have a ring. I barely have strength. But I have a heart that belongs to you. Adunni, will you marry me? She dropped to her knees, sobbing. Yes. 1,000 times yes. They held each other by the river. 2 broken people who had healed each other. News spread instantly. The kingdom divided. The palace council of elders demanded a meeting. Chiefs voiced concerns about tradition, lineage. Prince Obiora stood before them, still shaky but standing. You ask if Adunni has royal blood. She doesn't. But she has courage that walks into palaces uninvited to help strangers. She has faith that looked at my broken legs and saw a man who could walk. Adunni stepped forward, voice quiet but clear. Honorable elders, I know I'm not what you expected. I'm not Igbo. I have no education. But I offer a heart that knows what it means to have nothing and still choose kindness. I can't promise to be the future queen you imagined, but I promise to be the queen your people need. The head of the council of elders, Chief Okonkwo, stood up and said, My king, the prince speaks with passion, the girl with humility. But tradition. Just then King Emeka rose. Tradition serves the people, not binds them. If our traditions prevent us from recognizing goodness, perhaps they need to change. My son will marry this woman. If the council can't support this, I'll form a new one. Silence. No king had ever threatened such a thing. Chief Okonkwo bowed slowly. If the king believes so strongly, the council will respect his wisdom. One by one, the others stood and bowed. But Queen Neoma remained seated, silent. Few weeks later, the kingdom gathered for the wedding ceremony. Adunni wore royal indigo and gold, but at her throat hung two beads, one faded, one gleaming, her past and her future. And she walked barefoot, the way she'd first entered the palace. Obiora walked slowly with a carved stick, but on his own feet. The crowd cheered as he moved through street lined with villagers who had come to witness the union. When they reached the village square, the ceremony began with drums. Slow at first, then building like a heartbeat. Adunni started to dance. Not the wild movements of a girl trying to make a prince smile, but the dance of a woman who had survived everything and found joy anyway. Graceful, powerful, free. In her hands, she held a cup of palm wine. She danced toward Obiora, her movements telling their story, the pain, the healing, the love that refused to die. When she reached him, she knelt and offered the cup. Obiora drank, then helped her to her feet. Together they walked to where the king and queen sat on their thrones. They knelt. King Emeka placed his hand on Obiora's head. "You have my blessing. You've proven yourself worthy through courage." Queen Neoma hesitated, her hand hovering above Adunni's head. For a long moment, nothing. Then slowly, she placed her hand on the girl's head. No words came, but the gesture was enough. The priestess stepped forward. "What has been joined here today, let no one separate." She poured palm wine onto the earth. Silence. Then the drums exploded. The crowd erupted, dancing, singing, joy breaking free like a storm. That night, as the celebration music died down, Obiora pulled Adunni into the royal palace bedroom. His eyes sparkled with mischief. "I need you to do something for me, my queen," he said, trying to keep a straight face. "It's urgent." Adunni raised an eyebrow. "On our wedding night? What could you possibly?" "Dance for me," he interrupted, grinning. "The exact way you did that first day. The ridiculous, wild, crossing your eyes, falling on the grass dance." Adunni laughed, her hand flying to her mouth. "That dance? Now, in my royal attire?" "Especially in your royal attire," Obiora said, sitting in a chair and holding his walking stick with a playful smile. "I want to remember that you're still the barefoot village girl who slipped through the palace gates and made a broken prince laugh." Adunni's eyes softened. Then, without warning, she began, the same ridiculous dance from that first day. Puffed cheeks, crossed eyes, wild hopping, arms flailing everywhere. Obiora threw his head back and laughed. The same deep, uncontrollable laughter from that first afternoon under the mango tree. When she finished with a theatrical bow, he pulled her close, both of them breathless and grinning. "Never lose that," he whispered against her hair. "Promise me. No matter how many years pass, no matter how royal we become, never lose that joy." She touched the two beads at her throat. "Never," she promised. As they lay together that night, Obiora asked softly, "What are you thinking?" She smiled. "That love can come unexpectedly. And sometimes healing doesn't come from medicine. It comes from someone brave enough to dance in the darkness until someone else remembers how to smile." He kissed her forehead softly. They held each other and fell asleep. 5 years later, the kingdom prospered. Adunni, now Princess Adunni, walked through villages with the same bare feet, listening to people, helping the poor, dancing with children. She established shelters for orphans. She taught the children who came to the palace that worth comes from character, not status. And Queen Neoma watched it all. She watched Adunni care for sick children. She watched her speak gently to servants. She watched her share meals when harvests were poor. She watched her dance with elderly women and men in forgotten corners. And slowly, the queen's heart began to crack. One evening, Queen Neoma found Adunni in the garden, tending flowers with bare feet in the soil. "Adunni," she said quietly. The young woman looked up, surprised. "Your Majesty, sit with me." They sat beneath the mango tree where Obiora had once sat in his wheelchair. "I was wrong about you," the queen finally whispered. "For 5 years I watched, hoping to find proof you were unworthy. Instead, I watched you become everything I should have been. Tears fell. I spread lies. I called you a witch. I tried to drive you away when you were the answer to my prayers. Can you forgive me?" Adunni reached for the queen's hands. "I forgave you long ago, mother. I understood your fear." Queen Neoma sobbed and pulled her into an embrace, their first real embrace. "You are my daughter," she whispered. "You always were. I was just too blind to see it." From the balcony, Obiora and King Emeka watched, wiping tears. "Your mother has finally found peace," the king said. Obiora smiled. Adunni doesn't demand change. She simply loves until love changes everything. The story of the dancing girl and the prince who learned to walk was told for generations. And the kingdom learned a truth that would echo forever. Love, real, courageous love, can transform everything. A paralyzed prince learned to walk. A homeless girl became a queen. A bitter queen learned to forgive. A kingdom learned to measure worth by character. And it all started with one simple act. A girl who saw someone suffering and chose to dance. If this story touched your heart, share it with someone who needs to remember that love conquers all. Tell us in the comments which moment moved you most and where in the world you're watching from. Subscribe for more powerful stories that remind us what it means to be human. Until next time, keep dancing through the darkness. Your courage might be someone else's miracle.